The night I was called a gold digger in a ballroom full of millionaires, the most dangerous man in the room decided to make me his wife. A few hours earlier, I had been sitting across from a bank manager, pretending my hands were steady while he calmly explained that my family's bookstore would be seized at 9 o'clock the next morning. My stepfather's debt had finally caught up with us. The store my mother built from nothing. The store that still smelled like paper, cedar, and the perfume she used to wear. Gone. I'm asking for one more week, I said. You're out of time, Ms. Whitmore. That was how I ended up at the Hale Foundation Gala in downtown Denver, wearing my only black dress and a pair of heels that punished every step, chasing the last man who might remember my mother and care enough to help. I found him near the Champagne Tower. I barely got his name out before Mason stepped in. My ex-perfect suit. Perfect smile. Perfect timing, if your goal was cruelty. He looked at me, then at the investor, and laughed. Careful, he said. Claire only shows up when she needs money. Heat climbed into my throat so fast it hurt. The investor's face changed. So did the air around me. That's not true, I said, but Mason was already enjoying himself. Come on, he said. You always did know how to pick powerful men. People started watching. That was the worst part. Not the insult. The audience. I wanted to disappear. Instead, a cold voice sliced clean through the room. Then you should know better than to embarrass yourself in my house. Mason went still. So did I. Ethan Hale stood a few feet away, tall and unreadable, like winter had learned how to wear a tuxedo. His gaze touched me for 1 second, then shifted to Mason. Leave. Mason tried a smile. I was only joking. Ethan didn't blink. I wasn't. Mason left. The room exhaled. I didn't. Ethan looked at me like he already understood exactly how trapped I was. Then he said, marry me for 6 months, Claire, and your bookstore is saved tonight. And just like that, humiliation stopped being the worst thing that could happen to me. I should have walked away the second Ethan Hale said the word marry like it belonged in a contract, not a life. Instead, I stood there under crystal light with my heart pounding against my ribs, every bad decision I had ever survived lining up behind my eyes. I'm not for sale, I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Good, Ethan said. I'm not buying you. I'm offering terms. That somehow made it worse. I refused him. Not gently. Not politely. I told him men like Mason already thought I chased power, and I was not about to prove them right by marrying the coldest billionaire in Colorado for a bailout. Ethan listened without blinking. No apology. No charm. No fake warmth. Just that same still, dangerous calm. Then keep your pride, he said. And lose the bookstore by morning. The words landed clean. Cruel because they were true. I turned and walked away anyway. I needed air. Distance. Anything that didn't smell like expensive whiskey and public humiliation. Then my phone rang before I even reached the curb. Unknown number. The bank. I answered with shaking fingers and heard the final blow. Ms. Whitmore, the property lock will begin at 9 a.m. sharp. I stopped cold on the hotel steps. Denver traffic blurred below me. Red taillights. Horns. My own breathing. There has to be another option, I said. There isn't. The line went dead. For 1 second, I hated everyone. My stepfather. Mason. Myself. Then I looked back through the glass doors and saw Ethan still standing exactly where I'd left him, as if he had known I would return. The walk back felt longer than it was. Every step hurt. My heels. My pride. The last illusion I had about being in control. His driver took me upstairs to a private penthouse where the city looked small and unreal beneath walls of glass. A woman in a navy suit handed me a printed document. Ethan stayed by the window. Read it. So I did. 6 months. Public appearances. Total discretion. No romance. No interference in each other's private decisions. Mutual confidentiality. I would play the role of wife, with none of the promises that usually came with one. I read every line twice. Then I looked up. Why me? Ethan finally turned. Because you need saving, he said. Then his eyes went colder. And because I need a wife by tomorrow. I signed the contract at 12:14 a.m. By sunrise, I was married. Not engaged. Not dating. Married. The ceremony took place in a private chapel tucked behind Ethan Hale's Aspen estate, the kind of place built for old money and older secrets. Snow blanketed the pines outside. Inside, everything was white stone, candlelight, and silence. Too much silence. The ceremony was short. Brutal, almost. A judge. 2 witnesses. One signature after another. I stood there in a cream-colored dress that had appeared in my suite before dawn, as if the house itself had already decided what kind of woman I would be. Ethan never asked if I liked it. He only adjusted his cuff links and said, "This ends in 6 months if you follow the rules." I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt erased. The reception was worse, if a room full of cold champagne and colder stares could even be called a reception. No music. No dancing. Just polished smiles and sharp eyes measuring me against a standard no one had bothered to explain. A tall blonde woman in silver stepped into my path before I reached the bar. Sienna Cross. Beautiful in that expensive, dangerous way some women wore like perfume. She looked me over slowly and smiled without warmth. "So this is your solution?" she asked Ethan, not me. A human girl in a borrowed ring? My spine went rigid. Ethan didn't answer right away. That was the worst part. The pause. The public weighing of my value. Then he said, "Watch your tone, Sienna." It should have helped. It didn't. Because he still hadn't denied she had the right to judge me. Then came the photos. Flash after flash after flash. People moving around us in black and winter white while I stood there feeling less like a person and more like a prop. Behind me, 2 men lowered their voices, but not enough. He actually did it. The alpha married her. I froze so hard the photographer told me to relax my shoulders. Alpha. There it was again. That strange, loaded word that sounded wrong in this room and yet somehow explained everything. I turned slightly toward Ethan. "What did he call you?" I asked under my breath. His hand settled at my waist for the photo, firm enough to look intimate, controlled enough to feel like a warning. He kept his eyes forward. "Smile, Claire." So I did. Because the cameras were on us. Because I had already signed away the right not to. Because something in his voice told me that whatever alpha meant, I was already too deep to climb back out. The first morning after I married Ethan Hale, I learned that being his wife didn't mean I belonged anywhere. It started with the house itself. Hale House sat high above the Colorado pines like it had been dropped out of some colder, richer universe and told the mountain to adjust. Stone. Glass. Security at every entrance. Staff who moved like silence had been trained into them. A woman named Mrs. Dalton led me through hallways wider than my old apartment and stopped outside a bedroom larger than my family's bookstore. "This is your wing, Mrs. Hale. Your wing. Not your room. Not your home. Your wing." I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over snow and dark evergreens and felt something ugly twist in my chest. I had married a man rich enough to give me my own wing. And somehow I had never felt smaller. Brunch should have been private. It wasn't. A long room of polished wood, silver coffee service, and people dressed like denim had never touched their skin. They all knew exactly who I was before I sat down. Ethan's new wife. The unexpected one. The one they hadn't approved of. Their eyes kept landing on me, then sliding away with that same precise little cut of disapproval. One woman asked where I summered. Another asked what family I came from. The questions sounded harmless. They weren't. Denver, I said. And just the Whitmore family. A man across from me smiled into his espresso. How refreshingly ordinary. Heat rose to my face. Fast. Then Sienna arrived late, wrapped in cream cashmere and confidence. She didn't sit. She circled. I heard Ethan married quickly, she said, looking right at me. I didn't realize he meant Charity quickly. A few people laughed. Quietly. That made it worse. I set down my cup before I spilled it. If you have something to say, I told her, say it without an audience. Her smile widened. Fine. You don't belong here. And the part one hated most? Ethan heard every word. He stood near the window, one hand in his pocket, unreadable as ever. I waited for him to stop it. He didn't. Not right away. Long enough for the silence to buzz against my skin. Long enough for me to understand exactly what this marriage was. A contract. A title. A seat at the table with no one willing to make room for me. I pushed back my chair. Excuse me. Because if I stayed 1 second longer, I was going to break in front of all of them. No one stopped me. Not even my husband. I made it all the way to the stone terrace before the first crack showed. Not in me. In the only thing I had left from my mother. I was standing there in the mountain air, trying not to cry over a breakfast table full of strangers, when one of the women from brunch followed me out wearing a smile too polite to trust. Don't take Sienna personally, she said, stepping closer like we were suddenly friends. Some women are simply raised for this life. I should have walked away. Instead, I touched the gold locket at my throat. My mother's locket. The one she wore every day in the bookstore. The one thing in that frozen estate that still felt like home. The woman looked at it and gave a soft little laugh. That's what you wore here? Then her hand brushed my shoulder. Light. Deliberate. My chain caught on the edge of a wrought iron chair and snapped. The locket hit the stone with a hard metallic crack. My breath left me. Oh no, she said, and she did not sound sorry. I dropped to grab it. My heel slipped on a patch of ice near the terrace steps. 1 second I was kneeling. The next I was pitching sideways toward cold stone and a drop that suddenly felt a lot farther than 3 steps. Then a hand locked around my arm. Firm. Unshakable. Ethan. He pulled me upright so fast my shoulder hit his chest. Heat slammed through me. Anger too. Enough. That single word cut through the terrace like glass. By then, everyone had followed us outside. Even Sienna. Even Mrs. Dalton. Ethan looked at the woman who had broken my necklace, and his face went frighteningly calm. Your family's contract with Hale Security is over. Silence. Pure silence. The woman went pale. Mr. Hale, it was an accident. No, Ethan said. It was disrespect. That part was somehow worse because it happened in public. Protective. Final. He bent. Picked up my broken locket himself, and placed it in my palm like it mattered. Then he took my elbow and walked me back inside while the room parted around us. No one laughed. No one even breathed too loudly. The second the library doors shut behind us, I turned on him. So that's it? You humiliate people when they embarrass your wife? His gaze dropped to the locket in my hand, then lifted to my face. Cold again. Controlled again. Don't misunderstand me, Claire. I wasn't protecting you. My chest tightened anyway. Then he added, I was protecting what's mine. The worst part about Ethan Hale saying I was his was that some reckless, humiliating part of me wanted to know how much he meant it. That night I couldn't sleep. My mother's broken locket sat on the vanity waiting to be repaired, and Ethan's voice kept replaying in my head. I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting what's mine. I hated that sentence. I hated even more that it stayed under my skin. So I pulled on a sweater and went downstairs for tea. I stopped cold outside the dark kitchen. Ethan was there, braced against the marble counter, one hand gripping the edge hard enough to whiten his knuckles. His suit jacket was gone. His dress shirt was half unbuttoned. There was blood near his shoulder. My pulse jumped. You're hurt. He turned too fast. His expression shut down instantly. Go back to bed, Claire. I should have listened. Instead I stepped closer. That's not a scratch. The moment I reached for the first aid kit, he caught my wrist. Not rough. Just fast. I said leave it. His eyes locked on mine, and for a second the room felt too small for both of us. Then his grip loosened. Something unreadable crossed his face. Exhaustion, maybe. Or trust. He let go. I cleaned the wound in silence. The cut was deep enough to matter, shallow enough to hide. That somehow made it worse. He stood there like pain was an inconvenience, not a warning. Does your world always bleed this much? I asked. His mouth tightened. Only when people forget their place. Then my fingers brushed warm skin near the bandage, and the air changed. Sharp. Strange. Too aware. Ethan went still. So did I. For one dangerous second, neither of us moved. Then he stepped back. Like I had done something reckless. Don't confuse proximity with intimacy. The words landed cold. I set the gauze down harder than necessary. Trust me. I'm not the one who's confused. I left the kitchen and noticed the mud first. A dark streak across the back hallway tile. Then another near the mudroom door. Fresh boot prints. Too large to belong to any member of staff. I followed them to the glass doors and saw the latch hanging crooked, the security camera outside tilted toward the ground. My breath caught. Ethan was beside me in an instant. His whole body changed. Harder. Sharper. Deadly calm. He punched a code into the panel, and every lock in the house clicked at once. From now on, he said, staring into the black trees, you do not leave this estate without me. I looked at the broken camera, then at the forest beyond it, and realized someone had already come close enough to touch the house. I waited exactly 6 hours before breaking Ethan Hale's newest rule. That felt generous. At breakfast, I lied. I told Mrs. Dalton I had a headache. I told the driver I needed fresh air. Then I slipped out through a side entrance the second the security shift changed and took the first town car into Aspen. The bookstore was still standing because Ethan had paid the bank. But saving the building wasn't the same as saving what was inside it. I needed to see it for myself. I needed one place in my life that still felt like mine. The bell above the door gave its old, familiar chime when I stepped inside. Dust floated in the morning light. Shelves. Paperbacks. My mother's handwritten staff pick still tucked beneath the new releases. Relief hit so hard it almost hurt. Then I saw the office door hanging half open. The file drawers had been yanked out. Boxes were open. My mother's desk had been searched with cold, ugly purpose. Not robbed. Searched. Whoever had come here wasn't after money. They wanted something specific. I dropped to my knees beside the bottom drawer where Mom kept old receipts, letters, records, all the boring little pieces of a life. Everything was scattered. What were they looking for? I whispered. The empty store gave me nothing back. Then a voice answered from behind me. That's exactly what I told you not to find out alone. I spun around. Ethan stood in the doorway in a dark coat, snow melting on his shoulders, fury held so tightly beneath his calm it made the whole room feel smaller. You followed me? I snapped. You disobeyed me. He crossed the room, took one look at the desk, and his face hardened. "We're leaving." I stood so fast the chair scraped. "No. This is my mother's store. My life. You do not get to drag me out every time something makes you uncomfortable." He stepped closer. "Not touching. Worse. This is not about discomfort, Claire." His voice dropped low enough to cut. "Someone searched your family's history after breaking into my house. Start taking that seriously." The part one hated was that I already was. The fight continued in the car, with Aspen sliding past in white and gray blurs and both of us too angry to pretend. "Then tell me the truth," I said. "Why am I suddenly worth hunting?" Ethan stared out the window for a long second before answering. "Because you don't understand what they think you belong to." I turned toward him, pulse kicking hard. "Who are they?" His jaw locked. "That's not the right question." Then he finally looked at me, and whatever I saw in his eyes made my stomach drop. "The right question is what they want from you." I should have stayed inside after Ethan said the danger was about me, not just around me. Instead, I spent the rest of the day trying to breathe inside a house that suddenly felt less like protection and more like a locked box. Just after sunset, the estate went too quiet again. No voices. No footsteps. Just wind moving through the pines and the memory of Ethan's eyes when he told me I was asking the wrong question. I told myself I only needed air. 5 minutes. Maybe less. I slipped out through the rear terrace doors and followed the stone path toward the tree line, wrapped in wool and bad judgment. The cold bit hard. Then I heard it. A low, rough sound from deeper in the woods. Not a dog. Not anything normal. My whole body went still. "Ethan?" I called, hating how small my voice sounded. No answer. Only that sound again. Closer. Then a figure stepped out from behind the trees. Male. Tall. Face hidden. Beneath a dark knit cap. He moved too quietly for frozen ground. "Mrs. Hale," he said, like he knew exactly who I was. Every instinct in me screamed. I backed away. "Do I know you?" He smiled. That was worse than a threat. "Not yet." Then he reached for me. I turned and ran. My boots slipped on packed snow. Branches caught my sleeve. I could hear him behind me. Not hurrying. Just certain. He caught my wrist near an old trail marker at the edge of the property. Hard enough to stop me. My breath tore out of me. Then something moved through the dark so fast I couldn't understand what I was seeing. 1 second the stranger had me. The next he was gone, thrown backward into the snow as something huge and terrifying crashed between us. I stumbled and fell. White breath. Dark fur. A sound no normal animal could make. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. The stranger scrambled up and ran. Whatever had come for him didn't follow. It turned toward me instead. And in that instant, the world split in half. The creature stepped forward, massive and silver-black in the moonlight, chest heaving, eyes fixed on mine with a terrifying kind of intelligence. Then the air shifted. Its shape changed. Not slowly. Not naturally. Just impossibly. And when the dark settled, Ethan stood there in the snow, coat torn at one shoulder, breathing hard, his eyes no longer fully human. I couldn't move. I could barely think. He took 1 step toward me. "You've seen enough." My throat went dry. "What are you?" His jaw tightened. "From this moment on, Claire, you do exactly as I say." I had just watched my husband become something impossible and then become a man again, and the part that frightened me most was that Ethan still wanted obedience before explanation. The moment he got me back inside, he took me to his study, shut the doors, and stood between me and the exit like the room itself answered to him. I was still shaking. Still cold. Still seeing silver-black fur every time I blinked. Start talking, I said. My voice cracked anyway. Ethan drew one hard, controlled breath. Then he gave me the truth the same way he gave everything else. Brutally. I'm an alpha, he said. My family leads a hidden pack built on old business alliances, old bloodlines, and older laws. I stared at him. That's impossible. His eyes held mine without flinching. You already know it isn't. Then he kept going. He told me the people at the wedding weren't just donors and family friends. They were tied to the pack, tied to the council, invested in who he married and why. He told me Sienna wasn't just jealous. She was part of a strategic alliance. He told me Alpha wasn't a nickname. It was power. Title. Command. Then why marry me? I asked. This time he answered too quickly. Because you were safer at my side than out in the open. Safer. The word should have comforted me. It didn't. You used me as a shield, I said. And you lied to my face. His jaw tightened. I gave you the version of the truth you could survive. That hurt worse because part of me believed he meant it. I paced away from him, my thoughts turning jagged. The gala. The contract. The wedding. The cameras. The strangers looking at me like I had walked into the wrong species. You let me marry into this without a choice. He cut in, low and sharp. No. I gave you a choice under impossible circumstances. I did not create the danger, Claire. I moved first. It was such a perfectly Ethan answer I almost laughed. Almost. Do you hear yourself? I asked. You keep talking like strategy excuses betrayal. For the first time, something in his face shifted. Not guilt. Not quite. But something heavier than indifference. Then he stepped back from the door. Just enough to matter. Then leave, he said. The words landed harder than I expected. If you want out, I won't stop you. My throat tightened. He held my gaze and finished the thought like a warning carved in stone. But once you walk away from me, I can't guarantee your safety. I should have hated him. Maybe I did. But beneath the fear and the fury, one thought kept rising like a blade. My mother knew something about this world. Someone had searched the bookstore for it. And now I knew enough to understand one thing clearly: walking away blind would be the stupidest thing I could do. I'm staying, I said. Ethan went still. I lifted my chin. Not because I trust you. Because I want answers. The next morning, Ethan took me to meet the people who had been judging me since the wedding, and for the first time, I understood that humiliation could wear a tailored coat and call itself tradition. The drive was silent. No small talk. No warning beyond, stay beside me and say only what you mean. The SUV climbed higher into the mountains until the road disappeared behind iron gates and old stone walls. Whatever waited beyond them was not a board meeting. It felt older. Colder. More personal. Ethan stepped out first, then held the door for me like a gentleman performing a role he didn't believe in. Inside, the council chamber looked like a private lodge built by men who worshipped power and never apologized for it. Long table. Dark wood. Firelight. Faces turning toward me all at once. They didn't greet me as a bride. They assessed me like a problem. One silver-haired woman gave my dress a slow glance and said, "So this is the human girl." Human girl. Not Claire. Not Mrs. Hale. Human girl. The insult landed exactly where she wanted it to. A man beside her folded his hands. You moved fast, Alpha. That usually means weakness or urgency. Which is it? Ethan's voice stayed level. Neither. That should have steadied me. It didn't. Because every eye in the room was still on me, waiting to see if I would crack. Then Sienna walked in like she belonged there more than I ever could. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked offended by it. "This is absurd," she said, stopping across from Ethan. "You tied yourself to a woman with no standing, no training, no verified bloodline claim, and you expect this council to respect it? Bloodline." There it was again. Another word dropped like a match into dry tinder. I straightened before fear could bend me. "You keep talking about me like I'm furniture," I said. The room went still. Sienna smiled. "Furniture is at least placed where it belongs." And that was the moment I stopped trying to survive the room and decided to answer it. I looked at the whole table and let my voice sharpen. "Then say it plainly. You don't hate me because I'm weak. You hate me because I'm outside your rules, and that makes me harder to control." Silence. Thick. Immediate. Total. Then one of the oldest men there leaned forward. He hadn't said a word until then. Narrow face. Quiet eyes. He wasn't mocking me. He was studying me. Really studying me. Then he said, almost to himself, "Those eyes." My pulse kicked hard. Ethan went rigid beside me. I turned toward the old man. "What about them?" He didn't answer. He kept looking at me like he had just seen a ghost sit down at the Alpha's table. After the council meeting, Ethan decided the solution was not to explain me. It was to train me. At dawn, he took me to the lower terrace behind the estate, where the snow had been cleared into white banks and the mountain air bit like a warning. He stood across from me in a charcoal sweater, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. "If they test you again, you do not retreat," he said. "You hold eye contact. You do not ramble. And you never show fear before they earn it." I folded my arms against the cold. "So that's what I am now? A project?" His gaze didn't shift. "You're my wife in a world that punishes weakness." The sentence landed too hard because part of me already knew he was right. Then the lesson got physical. Not intimate. Worse. Precise. He showed me where to stand in a room. How to keep my chin level. How to speak without sounding like I was asking permission to exist. Every correction came clipped and exact. Again. Slower. Don't step back first. I did all of it because I refused to be humiliated twice by the same people. But my anger kept rising anyway. "You keep teaching me how to survive your world," I said, "but you still won't tell me why that old man looked at me like he knew me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Because speculation is dangerous." I laughed once. Bitter. "No. Silence is convenient. For you." Then he stepped behind me to adjust my stance. One hand hovered for a second, then settled on my shoulder. Firm. Warm through my coat. The other touched my wrist and lowered it an inch. "You lead with control," he said quietly. "Not defense." My breath caught. It was ridiculous. One touch. One correction. That was all. But my body reacted before my pride could stop it. Ethan went still too. I felt it. That sharp split second. When the air changed and neither of us could pretend it hadn't. I turned my head. He was too close. Close enough for me to see the restraint in his face like a locked door straining at the frame. Then he stepped back first. Fast. Cold. Don't confuse preparation with trust. There it was again. The wall. Clean. Brutal. Familiar. I swallowed and lifted my chin. "Trust me. I'm not the one turning this into something else." But when he walked away without answering, I stood there on the terrace with my pulse still unsteady and one humiliating thought I couldn't shake. If this marriage was only strategy, why did it feel so dangerous every time he touched me? The first time the world called me a gold digger, it happened in a ballroom. The second time, it happened on every screen in America. My phone buzzed across the breakfast table. I looked down and saw my own face under a headline ugly enough to make my stomach turn. Ethan Hale's mystery wife, small town ex, big time ambition. There were old photos of me and Mason outside my college apartment. A cropped shot from a fundraiser. A quote from someone close to the couple, claiming I had spent years chasing powerful men. My coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Ethan took the phone from my hand, read one line, and went cold in that dangerous, silent way of his. Who had access to these? Mason, I said. This has his fingerprints all over it. By noon, every gossip account had picked it up. Reporters camped outside the estate gates. One of them even tracked down the bookstore. I wanted to hide. Not because I had done anything wrong. Because I was tired of being turned into something cheap by people who had never known me. Ethan's team gathered in the study. Statements. Counter-statements. Legal threats. Damage control. All of it made me feel smaller. I don't need you to rescue me every time someone lies, I said. He looked up from the folder in his hands. This is no longer just about you. The word stung. That's funny, I said. Because my name is the one they're feeding to the wolves. Then he said there would be a press conference. Public. Immediate. I almost laughed. You want to put me on display after this? He stepped closer, expression unreadable. No. I'm giving you the choice to stand beside me instead of behind me. That stopped me. An hour later, I stood under camera lights in a charcoal coat, pulse hammering, while questions came fast and sharp. Did Claire Whitmore marry you for money? Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked at me first. Just once. Then he turned toward the cameras and said, each word cut clean, no one speaks about my wife that way. The room went still. So did I. My wife. Not the contract. Not the arrangement. Not the scandal. His wife. Then the noise came rushing back louder than before, but I barely heard it. Because Ethan's hands settled at the small of my back, firm and claiming, and for one reckless second I forgot how to breathe. Then I saw Sienna at the edge of the crowd, watching us with a smile too calm to mean anything good. By the time Ethan called me his wife in front of the press, should have felt safer. Instead, I found myself looking at my mother's old things like they might finally explain why everyone around me kept acting like I had wandered into a war I was somehow born for. I went back to the bookstore under the excuse of checking inventory. That part was true. What I didn't say was that I was searching for anything my mother might have hidden before she died. The office still smelled like dust, ink, and old cedar. Familiar. Human. Mine. I went through file boxes, receipt books, yellowed envelopes, and old paperbacks until my fingers caught on a folded page tucked inside an out-of-print poetry collection my mother used to keep behind the register. It wasn't exactly a letter. More like a note. Symbols. Half-sentences. Fragments. And in one corner, a mark I had already seen on a council ring. My pulse jumped so hard it hurt. Then the bell over the front door rang. I looked up expecting security. It wasn't security. It was the old man from the council chamber, wrapped in a dark wool coat, his face lined and unreadable in the daylight. You shouldn't be alone, he said. I stood so fast my chair scraped against the floor. Then maybe someone should stop lying to me. His gaze fell to the paper in my hand, and something moved across his face. Recognition. Grief. Your mother. Carried that mark once, he said quietly. Not as property. As protection. My mouth went dry. You knew her. I knew what she prevented, he said. Two packs nearly tore each other apart over a succession claim. Your mother stood in the middle and stopped it. The bell rang again. Harder this time. Ethan came in like the cold itself had opened the door for him, Lucas at his shoulder. One look at the old man. One look at the paper in my hand. And Ethan's entire body locked. Enough. The elder didn't flinch. You can't keep hiding her and half-truths forever, Alpha. My heart slammed once, hard enough to hurt. I looked between them. Hide me from what? Ethan's voice went flat enough to cut. We're leaving. I didn't move. Not until someone tells me why my mother had council markings hidden in her bookstore. And that was when the old man finally looked at me, not like I was a curiosity now, but like I was an answer he had always dreaded. Because your mother was never supposed to disappear into the human world, he said. And neither were you. Ethan stepped forward immediately. Not another word. But it was already too late. Because whatever I had been before that moment, I was no longer collateral. I found out jealousy could feel almost as humiliating as betrayal the night I watched Ethan stand beside Sienna like I had imagined everything between us. It happened at a winter benefit in Vale, the kind of event where the chandeliers looked expensive enough to judge people on their own. After what happened at the bookstore, Ethan said almost nothing in the car. Nothing about my mother. Nothing about the elder. Nothing about what I was supposed to be. And then, instead of answers, he gave me instructions. Stay close. This is political. I almost laughed. Everything with him was political. Inside the ballroom, I lasted maybe 10 minutes before I saw Sienna glide to his side in a silver gown that matched her smile. Too elegant. Too practiced. Too familiar. She leaned in. He bent his head to hear her. No touching. No intimacy. That made it worse somehow, because it looked easy. Old. Like belonging. Of course she's here, I muttered. Lucas, stationed near the entrance, kept his expression blank. Miss Cross is part of a legacy alliance. Legacy. Another word that made me feel borrowed. Then I watched Ethan step out onto the terrace with Sienna to speak privately. He didn't look back. I stood there holding a champagne flute I had no intention of drinking, feeling every fragile, stupid moment between us go brittle in my chest. The press conference. The training. The way his hand had steadied my back like I mattered. Maybe I had been his wife when cameras were on. Maybe I was just a problem again now. I set the glass down before I dropped it and moved toward the far hall, where the music sounded distant and my pride could at least fail in private. That was where Sienna found me. Of course it was. You look upset, she said, folding her arms like concern was just another accessory she wore well. I turned to leave. She stepped in front of me. You should know something, Claire. There are duties attached to Ethan's position that you will never fulfill. Some pairings are about more than affection. The word affection nearly made me laugh. Then congratulations, I said. You and Ethan sound perfectly miserable together. Her smile sharpened. Keep pretending this marriage means more to him than strategy. It'll hurt more when he reminds you what you really are. I walked away before she could see the hit land. But then, just before I reached the terrace again, I heard her voice through the curtain. A man spoke first, low and tense. Then Sienna answered, calm as frost. The contract wife won't last the month. I stopped dead. My pulse crashed hard against my ribs. Then the curtain shifted, and I realized with a sick drop in my stomach that I wasn't the only one listening. I was still hearing Sienna say I wouldn't last the month when the road home turned into a trap. Snow pressed against the SUV windows. The mountains had gone dark and endless around us. This time Ethan sat beside me, not across from me, one arm stretched along the seat behind me, silent in that dangerous way that always made me feel watched even when he said nothing at all. I almost told him what I'd heard. Almost. Then the driver slammed the brakes. My shoulder hit Ethan's chest. Headlights cut across the windshield from nowhere. A black truck had stopped sideways across the road. Stay inside, Ethan said, already reaching for the door. Of course he said that. Of course my pulse jumped anyway. Then two men moved out of the trees. Faces hidden. Steps fast. Certain. Lucas's security vehicle stopped behind us, doors opening hard, voices cutting through the cold. Everything outside the SUV shifted in an instant. Hard. Urgent. Deadly. Ethan got out anyway. I watched him step into the snow like he owned the mountain. One of the men came from my side of the SUV. I grabbed the handle too late. The door jerked open. A gloved hand locked around my wrist. Got her, the man snapped. Terror hit bright and clean. I fought anyway. Let go of me. Then Ethan was there. 1 second I was being dragged into the cold. The next he was in front of me, blocking out the entire world. The air around him felt wrong. Charged. Alive. I caught his arm on instinct. And the second I touched him, something tore through me. Heat. Pressure. A shock that didn't hurt, but still stole my breath. Ethan froze. So did I. One of the attackers stumbled back and stared at me like I was the real danger. The air key, he said. It's her. Then the men retreated into the dark as fast as they had come. Lucas was shouting into his radio. Snow spun through the headlights. Ethan turned, caught my face between both hands, and looked at me with eyes burning with something no longer cold. Look at me. I did. I couldn't do anything else. His grip tightened just once. Did he hurt you? I should have answered. Instead, all I heard was my own voice, thin and wrecked. What did he call me? Ethan pulled me against him like he could hide me inside his coat. But he said nothing. And that silence was answer enough. Because whatever had just sparked between us on that road, it was not part of any contract I had signed. By the time we got back to the estate, Ethan had turned the whole house into a fortress. And somehow, I was the thing being locked inside it. Doors I had never seen before slid into place. Steel ones. Hidden ones. Security panels appeared from behind wood and stone like the house had another skeleton under its skin. Lucas walked ahead. Mrs. Dalton avoided my eyes. Ethan said nothing. Until we reached the innermost section of the east wing, a part of the estate so sealed off it barely felt connected to the rest of the house. You'll stay here for now. I looked past him into the suite. A private sitting room. A bedroom. A study. Reinforced glass. One visible exit. Maybe two if you counted the one I was not supposed to notice. My pulse climbed hard. For now? I repeated. Meaning what, exactly? Ethan gave me nothing. Until I say the threat is contained. No, the word came out fast. Sharp. Entirely mine. I stepped back from the doorway instead of into it. You do not get to move me around like furniture every time your secret world catches fire. He went still in that terrifying way he had when control mattered more than comfort. Claire. Just my name. Low. Warning enough. I didn't stop. This is house arrest with better sheets. This is protection. I laughed once. Bitter. You keep using that word like it's supposed to make imprisonment sound romantic. Then he crossed the space between us. Not touching. Not yet. But close enough that I felt the force of him all over again, the same impossible charge from the road still alive under my skin. They didn't come for you because you're my wife, he said. They came because you may be something far more dangerous. My throat went dry. What does that mean? He held my gaze for a long second. Then, finally, he gave me more truth than I think he intended to. There are old lines in our world, he said. Rare ones. Tied to succession. To balance. To the Luna line that once held rival packs together instead of letting them tear each other apart. You may be anchor blood. The room seemed to tilt. My mother's hidden mark. The elder's face. The attacker calling me heir key. Every piece slammed together at once. And then anger came right behind the shock. Clean. Hot. Necessary. You knew enough to marry me. You knew enough to hide me. You knew enough to lock me up, I said. But you still thought I didn't deserve the truth? His expression hardened, but something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Too late. I lifted my chin. From now on, you do not make another decision about me without me. If I'm in this fight, Ethan, then I'm done being handled. I was fully prepared to stay angry at Ethan until the end of time. Then the woods handed me something wounded and frightened, and ruined the entire plan. It was just after sunrise when I heard it. A soft scraping sound outside the lower terrace. The east wing was alarmed, sealed, silent, and unbearable. So I followed the sound. At the edge of the snow-covered garden, I found a young gray wolf crouched near the stone wall, one back leg bleeding from a rusted wire snare someone had set beyond the property line. The sight hit me in the chest. Hey, I whispered, dropping to my knees in the snow. I'm not going to hurt you. The wolf bared its teeth anyway. More fear than threat. I knew that feeling too well. Then I heard Ethan's boots on the path behind me. Get away from it. Sharp. Immediate. Commanding. I didn't move. It's terrified. He stopped a few feet away, his whole body taut with a kind of alarm that felt bigger than the animal itself. Claire. Just my name again. One word. One warning. I reached carefully for the trapped leg. Then tell your world to stop injuring everything it touches. The wolf flinched when I loosened the wire, but it didn't bite me. Ethan watched in complete silence as I wrapped the leg with my scarf. When the wolf finally limped back toward the tree line, it paused once and looked at me before vanishing into the pines. Something changed after that. I stood, freezing, my hands red from blood and snow and shaking more than I wanted him to see. Ethan stepped forward and took my wrist, turning my palm over to check for cuts. His touch was careful this time. Not possessive. Not controlling. Careful. You should have called for someone, he said, but the edge had gone out of his voice. I looked at him. Really looked. Do you ever stop expecting the worst from everyone? The question landed harder than I meant it to. Something old moved behind his eyes. My father didn't, he said quietly. He trusted the wrong person once. It cost him everything. I went still. Ethan almost never gave away parts of himself without a fight. Is that why you hold on so hard to control? His hand stayed around my wrist 1 second. Too long. Control is the only thing that keeps people alive. Then came the silence. The dangerous kind. Snow drifting through the garden. My pulse slowing. His gaze dropping to my mouth, then lifting back to my eyes. The whole world narrowing to the space between us. I should have stepped back. I didn't. He leaned in just enough to make the air turn electric. Then his phone rang. Sharp. Brutal. Perfectly timed. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second like he hated the universe itself, released my hand, and answered. Whatever he heard erased the warmth from his face immediately. When the call ended, he looked at me and said, "The council has made a demand." The moment Ethan said that, whatever almost happened between us in the snow died without a sound. The war room was already lit when we got there. Screens glowing. Maps open. Too many people pretending not to notice that Ethan had walked in with my scarf still tied around his wrist. Lucas stood near the far wall, jaw tight, while 2 security analysts pulled up routes, schedules, and breach reports from the last 2 weeks. Ethan wasted no time. The council wants proof this marriage strengthens the pack, he said. Not sentiment. Not appearance. Proof. My stomach turned cold. How exactly are we supposed to prove that? His eyes met mine for one hard second. By surviving what comes next. That was not an answer. It was a threat dressed like strategy. Then one of the analysts cleared his throat and pointed to the screen. Every private movement I had made since the press conference had been anticipated. The bookstore. The benefit. Even the route home from last night. My pulse kicked hard. Someone had been feeding information out. Ethan started firing questions. Who had access to the motorcade schedule? Who knew I had gone back to the bookstore? Who had seen the East Wing logs? Names came up. Staff. Drivers. Security. Then line after line narrowed toward one source. Lucas's clearance key. The room changed instantly. Lucas didn't look offended. He didn't look panicked. He looked stunned in a way that was somehow more dangerous. You think I sold her out? Ethan didn't answer right away. That was the worst part. The pause. The possibility. I think someone used your access, he said at last. Lucas gave a humorless laugh. That's not what the room heard. And for the first time, I saw a crack in Ethan's inner circle. Ugly. Personal. If Ethan could doubt Lucas, then nobody in that house was beyond suspicion. Not even me. Enough, I said before the silence turned poisonous. Every head in the room turned toward me. If someone wants me exposed, then stop treating me like a package and tell me what they gain by taking me. Ethan's expression hardened, but he didn't shut me down. He looked at the analyst instead. Say it. The man swallowed. If Mrs. Hale is really tied to the old Luna line, then controlling her would shift succession leverage across multiple packs. The air in the room went thin. Lucas stepped back from the table like the floor had changed under him. You need to check the secondary server, he said. My key was copied 2 nights ago. Ethan's head snapped toward him. Why were you hiding that? Lucas didn't move. Because I wanted to confirm it before I accused someone inside your house. Then he added the part that froze everything. And because whoever copied it knew about the East Wing before you moved Claire there. I heard the part that could break me, and I did what hurt people always do first. I believe the worst. That night, after the war room cleared out and the whole house seemed to tighten around its own fear, I went looking for Ethan. His study door was almost closed. Not fully. Just enough for voices to slip through. I heard Ethan first. His voice was low. Tired. Stripped of the edge he used on everyone else. If the council forces it, the contract ends exactly as planned. My whole body went still. Lucas said something I couldn't make out. Then Ethan answered, quieter. I'm not dragging her deeper if this turns political beyond repair. That should have mattered. It should have. But all I heard was exactly as planned. 6 months. A role. A convenient wife with inconvenient blood. I backed away before the floor could betray me. Before Ethan could open the door and see what was left of my pride. Every small, dangerous moment between us turned stupid in hindsight. The press conference. The training. The snow. His hand around my wrist. His voice asking if I was hurt. I had mistaken proximity for meaning. Exactly like. He warned me not to. Back in my room, I stood staring at the contract copy locked in my desk and felt something cold settle inside me. Of course he would let me go if the council demanded it. He had chosen me for strategy. Maybe he had protected me. Maybe he had even cared in his own way. But protection wasn't love. And control wasn't devotion. The next afternoon, Mason texted me from an unknown number. I should have deleted it. Instead, I read every word. I know Ethan's world is closing around you. Meet me and I'll tell you who's using you. I nearly laughed. Mason had never offered help without poison hidden inside it. But poison still carried information. And right then, information mattered more than dignity. I texted back before I could stop myself. Public place. 15 minutes. Then the lie formed in my mouth before anyone even asked for it. I put on my coat, tucked my mother's folded note into my bag, and told Mrs. Dalton I needed air on the lower terrace. My pulse wouldn't slow. Not because I was afraid of Mason. Because for the first time since Ethan Hale married me, I was about to keep a secret from my husband. By the time I saw Mason waiting in the coffee shop window, I already knew meeting him had been a mistake. I just wasn't ready to admit Ethan had been right. Mason stood too fast when I walked in, like he still believed charm could cover what he was. "Claire," he said, giving me that old polished smile. "You look tired." I stayed standing. "You have 10 minutes. His smile thinned. "Good. Let him feel the difference." He slid a folder across the table. Printed photos. My wedding. Ethan's security team. Sienna at 2 different council events. "You're not his wife," Mason said. "You're leverage." The word landed hard because it echoed everything I already feared. "Tell me something I don't know." He leaned in. "Someone inside Hale's circle is feeding out your movements. They want you isolated before Ethan cuts you loose." I should have left right then. Instead, I asked the question that betrayed me. "Who?" Mason looked almost pleased. "That part costs trust." And then the cameras started flashing outside the window. Too many. Too sudden. My stomach dropped. Mason cursed under his breath, but not like a man surprised. Like a man inconvenienced. That was all I needed. "You set this up." He grabbed my sleeve when I turned. "Listen to me. If you stay with Hale, you're going to be the scandal that destroys him." I yanked free. "No," I said. "Men like you destroy things and then call it a warning." Reporters surged at the entrance before I got 3 steps. Questions hit fast and ugly. "Mrs. Hale, are you meeting your ex behind Ethan's back? Is the marriage already over? Did Ethan force you into a contract?" Shame burned hot. Anger burned hotter. I kept moving. Head down. Mouth shut. Then the crowd split. Ethan came through it like the storm had opened for him. Black coat. Hard eyes. Absolute fury held under perfect control. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't look at Mason first. He looked at me. That was worse. Then he took my elbow and said, low enough for only me to hear, "Get in the car." The ride back to the estate was ice. No shouting. No questions. Just a silence sharp enough to cut. I broke first. "You don't get to interrogate me after everything you hid." Ethan turned his head slowly. "And you don't get to run to Mason after everything he already did to you." That should have stopped me. It didn't. "At least Mason didn't marry me under false pretenses," I snapped. The second the words left my mouth, Ethan's face changed. Not anger. Hurt. Clean. Controlled. Worse. "You should have trusted your husband," he said, each word flat as stone, "before trusting him." Then he looked away. And for the first time since this marriage began, I understood exactly how badly I had damaged whatever fragile thing had started to grow between us. The truth came to me in pieces. And somehow every piece cut in Ethan's favor while my heart still chose the cruelest conclusion first. The next afternoon I went to the estate chapel because it was the only room in Hale House that didn't feel like it belonged entirely to Ethan. Stone walls. Dusty winter light. Silence deep enough to breathe in. I wasn't alone for long. The old council elder stepped out from the side aisle before I heard him coming. "You look like a woman standing in the ruins of a question," he said. I almost laughed. "That's because nobody in this house answers anything directly." He studied me for a long moment, then gave me what Ethan never had. Not the whole truth. Just enough to wound. "Your mother was what our world calls a bridge," he said. "Human-born, but tied to an old Luna succession law. A line that could steady rival claims instead of letting them burn everything down. My pulse kicked hard. And me? His face tightened. You may carry the same claim. Everything rearranged at once. The wedding. The council. The attack on the road. The heir key. The bloodline. So Ethan knew. The elder didn't answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. He married me because of this, I said. Because I was useful. The old man looked almost sorry. He chose you because you were important. Important. What a cold little word. Men like Ethan always turned human lives into strategy first. I felt something inside me go still. Not calm. Not healed. Still, the way ice is still before it cracks. I went back to my room and took the contract copy out of the desk drawer. 6 months. Terms. Silence. Exit. My hands shook only once. Then I started packing. Not much. Only what had ever truly been mine. Jeans. Sweaters. My mother's note. The broken locket. I left the ring on the vanity and stared at it until my chest hurt. If Ethan Hale had chosen me for blood, for power, for succession, then I was not staying long enough to become grateful for being used well. Downstairs, before I reached the hall, I heard voices coming from the study. Ethan. Lucas. Urgent. Focused. It was Nora, Lucas said. The financial channels, the leaks, all of it. She sold the schedules and framed the rest. I stopped cold. So the traitor was real. Not an excuse. Not a deflection. Real. Something shifted inside me. But not enough. Not yet. Because betrayal inside his circle didn't change the ugliest truth I thought I knew. I looked down at the car keys in my hand and made the decision anyway. If Ethan Hale had married me for what I carried, then I was leaving before he could decide what I was worth next. I left before dawn. And the first thing I felt outside Hale House was not freedom. It was exposure. No staff in the halls. No footsteps. Behind me. Just the soft click of the east wing door closing and the absence of Ethan's ring on my finger. I drove more by instinct than reason, hands locked around the wheel while the estate vanished behind me in gray mountain light. Every mile hurt somewhere new. Pride. Fear. Something softer I still refused to name. I told myself I wasn't running from Ethan. I was leaving before he turned me into one more sacrifice he could justify later. By the time I reached the bookstore in Aspen, my pulse had settled into something colder. Resolve. I'm back, I whispered to the dark front window, like the place itself might still choose me even if my husband had not. Inside, silence waited. Familiar silence. Safer than the estate. More honest. I dropped my bag behind the register, pulled the shades halfway, and started checking locks, drawers, floorboards, anything my mother might have hidden before she died. If I really was tied to some old line, then I needed the truth from her. Not from men who kept feeding me half of it. I was kneeling beside the office desk when my phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from Ethan. 1 text from Lucas. He knows you're gone. That should have shaken me more than it did. Instead, I stared at the screen and felt a brutal little satisfaction. Let Ethan feel one moment of not controlling the outcome. 10 minutes later, the bell over the shop door chimed once. I stood too fast, heart slamming. It wasn't Ethan. Just a college kid in a knit cap asking if we were open. The crash of adrenaline nearly made me laugh. Not yet, I said. He left. The bell rang again. This time no one came in. Just wind. Or maybe not just wind. I crossed to the window and saw a dark sedan parked half a block down, engine running, driver never getting out. My mouth went dry. Instinct moved before thought. I locked the door. Killed the front lights. and stepped back into the shadow between shelves. Then my phone vibrated again. Ethan. I stared at his name and didn't answer. The sedan stayed where it was. Waiting. Then another message appeared. Unknown number. We know you left the Alpha. You should not have done that alone. I spent half the night hiding in the shadow between the mystery section and local history, waiting for the sedan to leave. Somewhere around sunrise, I realized fear was useless if I didn't turn it into something. That was when I found the floorboard. My mother used to say every old bookstore had one honest secret and 10 fake ones. I had found hers years ago by accident and never thought about it again. Third plank from the desk. Left side. Slight warp near the nail head. I pried it loose with a letter opener and found a narrow metal box wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was a brass key, a folded map of the store, and an envelope with my name in my mother's handwriting. My hands shook before I even opened it. Claire, if you are reading this, they found you anyway. The words hit like a hand around my throat. She wrote that she had hidden documents beneath the original front display built by my grandfather, not because she feared thieves, but because she feared men who believed blood gave them the right to decide a woman's life. I dragged the old oak display shelf 3 inches to the right and found a recessed panel in the floor. The brass key fit. Of course it did. Inside was a leather folio sealed with the same council mark I had seen everywhere else. Marriage accords. Succession clauses. Luna precedents. Most of it looked like legal language written by wolves in human suits. But one section had my mother's notes in the margins. Sharp. Angry. Alive. No female line can be compelled into political union by blood claim alone. Consent is binding. Anything else is coercion. I sat back on my heels and stared at those words until my chest hurt. My mother had not vanished into the human world because she was weak. She had left because she refused to become an air-making tool for men with old laws and polished voices. She had fought this long before I was born. You weren't hiding me, I whispered into the empty office. You were buying me time. Something inside me shifted then. Hard. Clean. Ethan had tried to protect me his way. My mother had tried to protect me hers. But neither of them got to decide what I would do next. I took the folio, the letter, and my mother's note and put them all into my bag. Then I answered Ethan's last missed call with a text I never sent to him. I sent it to the council elder instead. If they want to talk about old laws, I'm done hiding behind old men. Tell the council I'm coming in my own name. For the first time since Ethan Hale pulled me into his world, I was not walking toward it as someone's wife. I was walking in as Claire Whitmore. I had already chosen to face the council alone when Ethan finally showed me the one truth I had never asked for in time. It happened in the alley behind the bookstore. I had slipped out the back for air after sending the message to the elder. Snow drifted past the dumpster lids. My bag hung at my shoulder. My mother's folio was inside. Then tires cut through slush at the mouth of the alley, and voices hit the cold too fast for me to move. Ethan. Lucas. Nora. I froze behind the half-open delivery gate before they saw me. Nora spoke first, her voice shaking. I sold the schedules, yes, but I didn't start this. The rival claim wanted the girl because her bloodline could legitimize succession across 3 packs. My pulse slammed. Ethan said nothing. That silence was worse than shouting. Then Nora broke again. You chose her because of that file, Ethan. Don't pretend you didn't. The words landed exactly where I expected them to. Then came the part one was not ready for. But you stayed because you got attached, Nora said. That was your mistake. You stopped treating her like leverage. Ethan stepped closer, and even from hiding I felt the force of him. My mistake, he said, voice low and lethally calm, was letting anyone near her who thought she could be used. That shook me harder than it should have. Because it didn't sound political. It sounded personal. Raw. Ugly. Honest. He had chosen me for the bloodline. That part remained true. But now there was something else in it. Something I hated how badly I wanted to believe. Nora left under Lucas's watch. Then Ethan came inside the bookstore. I heard him in the front room first. Then the office. Then the stairs. Claire. Just my name. Rougher now. Not controlled. Not alpha. My chest hurt so hard I had to grip the brick behind me. He found the empty mug by the register. The shifted shelf. The open floorboard. He knew immediately what I had done. She has the archive, Lucas said behind him. Ethan turned so fast the bell over the door rattled. Then she's going to the council alone. Then came the sentence that stopped me where I stood, one hand still on the delivery gate, my future already pulling me forward. Ethan closed his eyes once, hard, like the truth itself hurt. Then he looked at Lucas and said the words I had never expected from a man who built his life on control. Find the car. Lock down every road. I don't care what it costs. His voice dropped lower. Rough enough to break. I am not losing my wife because I was too late to say I love her. I walked into the council chamber without Ethan. And for the first time since this story began, every eye in the room had to face me before they faced him. No wedding dress. No alpha at my side. No borrowed title to stand behind. Just me in a dark wool coat, my mother's folio in my hands, and the old stone room that had once judged me like an accident. The long table was already full. Silver hair. Sharp suits. Old power pretending to be wisdom. Sienna stood near the far end in pale gray, too composed to be innocent. Several heads turned with open irritation. One elder looked genuinely offended that I had come alone. Good. State your standing, one of them said. His tone was not a request. I lifted my chin. Claire Whitmore. Not Mrs. Hale. Not anyone's leverage. Mine. The silence that followed sounded like a crack running under glass. I stepped to the center table and set the folio down hard enough for the sound to carry. You wanted old law, I said. Then let's talk about old law. My hands were steady now. Somehow. I opened the pages to the clauses my mother had marked in ink and pushed them forward. Succession claims tied to the Luna line cannot compel political marriage or mating without consent. It's right here. My mother wrote the correction in the margin because your system kept pretending women were bridges only when men wanted to cross them. A few faces changed. Not kindly. Sharply. The elder who had recognized me leaned forward first. Where did you get that archive? From the woman you all tried to erase into silence, I said. My mother. Sienna moved before the room could turn. Or perhaps, she said smoothly, we're expected to believe a bookstore owner's daughter just happened to uncover documents capable of rewriting succession power across multiple packs. I turned to face her fully. No. You're supposed to believe that you lost control of the story. Her smile thinned. Mine didn't. You don't hate me because I'm weak, I said. You hate me because I came from outside your rules and survived them anyway. The room went still enough to hear the fire crack in the stone hearth. Then one of the elders rose halfway from his seat. Boldness is not legitimacy. Before I could answer, another voice cut across the chamber from the doorway behind me. Cold. Male. Familiar enough to change the whole air. Then it's a good thing she brought both. I didn't turn right away. I didn't have to. I already knew Ethan had finally reached me. The room was already turning against me when they brought in the one thing they thought would finish the job. It happened the second Ethan stepped to my side. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. Just having him there changed the whole chamber. Claire Whitmore has standing under the archive law, he said, voice flat and absolute. And any challenge to that standing comes through me. For one reckless second, relief hit so hard it almost hurt. Then Sienna smiled. Not angry. Ready. Then let's stop pretending this is only about law, she said. She nodded once toward the side doors. And Mason walked in. He looked pale, cornered, expensive in a suit that clearly hadn't been his choice. My stomach dropped. Of course. Of course this was the move. Sienna lifted a folder and spread photographs across the table. The coffee shop. Mason catching my sleeve. Me turning toward him. Cropped angles. Dirty timing. Perfect lies. Your human wife meets secretly with her ex while private routes are being sold from inside your house, Sienna said. Are we really expected to believe she is only a victim in all of this? The room shifted hard. I felt it instantly. Suspicion. Hunger. That old, ugly instinct power has when it smells weakness. Mason swallowed and looked anywhere but at me. Tell them, Sienna said. Tell them Claire knew Ethan's marriage was strategic and wanted out before the scandal broke. That was when Ethan moved. One step. That was all. And somehow it silenced the entire room. Careful, he said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Lucas entered through the rear corridor with a tablet in one hand and Nora behind him, stripped of every ounce of authority she used to wear. Ethan never took his eyes off Sienna. You wanted evidence, he said to the council. Now you get all of it. Lucas set the tablet on the center table and pulled up everything. Transfer logs. Route leaks. Burner messages. Payment chains. Every line led back to Nora. Every manipulated image. Every press leak. Every copied clearance key. Every false trail. All of it. Nora broke first. Sienna promised the council would protect my family. And then Mason cracked. I never set Claire up alone, he blurted. I was paid to keep her angry at Hale long enough to separate them. Silence followed. Not shock. Not confusion. Something cleaner than that. Ruin. Sienna stood there in perfect posture and total collapse. For the first time since I had met her, she had no elegant way out. Then Ethan turned. Not to the elders. To me. His expression wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't distant. It was fierce in a way that made my pulse stumble. I'm done letting other people define what my wife is to me, he said. The room heard it. So did I. But even with the conspiracy dead around us, one truth was still standing between us like an open wound. Ethan had exposed the lie. He still hadn't answered for us. After the council chamber emptied and the last of the stone doors closed behind the elders, the silence changed. At last it was quiet enough to hear my own heartbeat again. Ethan stood across from me in the private side hall, coat half open, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on me like I might disappear if he blinked. I didn't let the silence save him. Tell me everything, I said. Not the polished version. Not the alpha version. All of it. He held my gaze for a long second. Then he nodded once. I chose you because of the file, he said. No excuse. No softening. No delay. At the gala, I already knew your name. I already knew your mother's history. I knew what your bloodline could mean if the rival claim reached you first. The words hit hard because they were so clean. So honest. So cruel. I let out a low, broken laugh. So I was right. You married me for strategy. At first, he said. Just those two words. And somehow that made it hurt even more. I told myself it was protection, he continued. Control. Risk management. A move before someone else made one. His jaw tightened. Then you kept defying me. You kept protecting people you didn't owe. You kept standing back up after every humiliation this world threw at you. And somewhere in the middle of all that, strategy stopped being enough. My throat tightened. You still lied. Yes. He didn't flinch. Didn't defend it. Didn't hide from it. The single word landed heavier than any excuse would have. I lied because I thought if I told you the full truth too soon, you would run, he said. And I lied because once I stopped seeing you as leverage, I was terrified of what losing you would do to me. Then he stepped closer. And for once, he didn't use power to corner me. He just stood there, stripped of everything except honesty. I should have told you before the contract was signed, he said. Before the wedding. Before the council. Before any of it. But by the time I knew I loved you, every version of the truth sounded like betrayal. My eyes burned. I hated that he was right. I hated even more that some part of me had been waiting to hear it. You do not get to decide my life and call it love. His face changed then. Not anger. Not defense. Acceptance. I know. And then he did the one thing I never expected him to do. He reached into his coat, pulled out my wedding ring, and placed it in my palm instead of putting it back on my finger. Warm metal. A full circle. A full wound. Then this time, he said, voice low and rough, you decide what happens next. He closed my fingers over the ring and stepped back. For the first time since the day he made me his wife, the distance between us was mine to cross or leave untouched. I went back to the bookstore with Ethan's ring still warm in my palm, and for the first time, the question was not whether he loved me. It was whether love was enough after everything it had cost us. The quiet after the council felt almost unreal. No cameras. No elders. No threats waiting just outside the door. Just the bookstore at dusk, golden light stretched across the floorboards, my mother's letter open on the counter, and me standing in the middle of the only place that had ever taught me how to breathe. I set the ring beside the register and stared at it like it might answer for him. Strategy had brought Ethan into my life. That part was ugly. And true. But every memory after that refused to stay cold. The terrace. The press conference. The snow. The wolf. The way he had looked at me when he thought I was gone. I don't know what to do with you, I whispered into the empty room. And this time, I wasn't talking to the ring. The bell over the door chimed. Mrs. Dalton stepped inside carrying 2 garment bags and an expression I had never seen on her before. Respect. Not for my title. For me. I thought you might need these, she said, setting them down gently. What are they? She hesitated. Then gave me the truth straight. Council alternatives. I frowned. They already approached Mr. Hale, she said. Another alliance. Another marriage prospect. A cleaner political solution now that your legal challenge weakened the old claim structure. Something hot and immediate cut through me. Jealousy. Then anger at myself for feeling it. And what did Ethan say? Mrs. Dalton held my gaze. He refused before they finished the offer. That hit harder than I expected. Not because it was dramatic. Because it wasn't. There had been no audience. No cameras. No performance. Just choice. Then she reached into her coat and handed me a folded note. Ethan's handwriting. Sharp. Controlled. Familiar now in a way that almost hurt. It was brief. Decline all council alternatives. My wife's freedom is not a bargaining chip, and neither is my future. My breath caught. Not because he called me his wife. Because he said it when I wasn't there to hear it. When there was nothing to gain by saying it. Only loss. I sat down slowly, the note trembling once in my hand. And that was when the choice finally became clear enough to hurt. Love was not enough when it arrived too late. But love that refused power. Refused control. Refused to trade me for peace. That was something else. That was a man learning how to deserve the woman he nearly destroyed. I picked up the ring, closed my fist around it, and looked toward the dark front window where snow had started to fall again. If Ethan Hale had finally chosen me without demanding me, then the next move had to be mine. I returned to Ethan at the winter summit, where our marriage had once looked like strategy and now felt like the one truth neither of us could survive without. The grand hall was all crystal light, dark suits, and old families pretending not to stare. Ethan stood near the center dais in black, carved out of restraint, answering counsel questions like every word cost him something. Then he saw me. And his whole body went still. I kept walking until I stood in front of him with the original contract in one hand and his ring in the other. "Claire," he said. My name sounded low. Stunned. Human. For 1 second, all the power in the room belonged to silence. Then I held up the contract for everyone to see. "This was never a marriage," I said. "It was an agreement built on debt, secrecy, and fear." A few elders shifted. Sienna, off to one side and politically ruined, looked almost hopeful. Then I tore the contract clean down the middle. And then again. The sound cracked through the hall like a verdict. "If I stay," I said, looking only at Ethan now, "I do not stay because I owe you. Or because of bloodline. Or because anyone in this room thinks they get to define me." Ethan's jaw tightened. But he did not interrupt. He waited. And that mattered. Then he asked the only question left. "And if you stay?" His voice was rougher than I had ever heard it. No command. No alpha. No control. Just a man standing in front of the woman he had almost lost. My eyes burned, but this time I didn't hide it. "Then I stay as your wife," I said, "because I choose you." The room disappeared after that. The council. The history. The damage. All of it. Ethan crossed the distance between us like he had been holding himself back for months and had finally run out of strength to do it. But he still stopped close enough to ask for what he once would have taken. "Are you sure?" I laughed once, tearful and wrecked and more certain than I had ever been. For the first time, yes. I placed the ring in his hand. And instead of putting it on me right away, he turned my palm over and kissed the center of it first. Gentle. Reverent. Earned. Then he slid the ring back onto my finger and said, for everyone in that room to hear, "No contract. No counsel. No one else. Only us." And for the first time since Ethan Hale made me his wife, the future did not feel like a trap. It felt like mine. Months later, the bookstore smelled like cedar and coffee again. And this time, the future no longer felt like something I had to survive. It was a Saturday morning. Sunlight stretched across the front table. A line of customers wound past the new community board Ethan had insisted we build near the entrance. Not for branding. Not for image. For me. For the neighborhood. For the version of my life that had existed before him and somehow stood stronger now because he had finally learned not to swallow it whole. Kids sat in the reading corner under paper stars. Local authors signed books near the back. The old hidden archive rested in a climate-controlled case beneath my mother's photograph, not buried anymore, not weaponized, just protected. Then Ethan stepped in from the cold carrying 2 boxes of new shipments like the most overqualified volunteer in Colorado. He looked ridiculous. Perfect. Far too tall for the narrow front aisle. "You're blocking the romance section," I told him. He set the boxes down and gave me that rare, unguarded smile I had fought half this story to earn. "That feels intentional." Upstairs, after closing, when the last customer had gone and the lights below dimmed to gold, he found me in the office. My mother's desk now held both invoices and council correspondence because apparently my life had become a merger between literature and supernatural diplomacy. I was still learning how to stand in both worlds without disappearing into either one. So was he. That mattered. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, hands loose. No command in his posture anymore. "The council approved the archive protections," he said. "No bloodline claim can be used against you now." My chest loosened in a place that had stayed tight for far too long. Against any woman, I corrected. His gaze held mine. Warm. Steady. Against any woman, he agreed. Then he crossed the room, slower now, always slower when it mattered, and rested his forehead against mine. You were right, he said quietly. Love doesn't get to control. I let out a shaky breath and touched his jaw. And you were right too. He looked at me. About what? I smiled. Small. True. Some things are worth fighting for before you know how to hold them. That night, the first snowfall of the season drifted over the street outside the bookstore. The door clicked shut behind us. The world beyond the windows glowed white and quiet. Then Ethan reached into his coat and drew out a small velvet box. For one startled second, I just stared at him, because I knew that look on his face now. Not strategy. Not caution. Choice. Simple. Certain. Entirely his own. He opened the box. Inside was a new ring. Elegant. Clean. No contract behind it. No deadline inside it. No invisible chains attached. Claire Whitmore, he said, voice rough in the cold, no counsel. No law. No debt. Just me asking the right way this time. Will you choose me again? The tears came before I could stop them. Happy ones this time. Earned ones. I laughed softly and held out my hand. Yes, I said. But only if you keep volunteering at the bookstore. He slid the ring onto my finger and kissed me under the falling snow, gentle and certain and real. And when I looked up at him, I did not see the dangerous man who once made me his wife. I saw the man who learned how to stand beside me instead. And for the first time, forever did not sound like a threat. It sounded like home.